Okay, so this video is going to cover how to insert the Caldera model into the topography. This is the 3D model that you guys can download off of our D2L course site, which, as you can see, it shows the kind of 3D surface of the topography, and it has a few lines in it. So these lines are roads, and if we kind of go to Google Earth here, Google Maps, you can see if we go out to where like San Rafael Valley is, we can look at kind of the patterns of the roads. So if you find this spot, Canelo, we follow that line down this fork. So this road right here is what we're going to use as our reference, and the house is actually like right there, I think. I'm going to go ahead and turn my aerial images on. I'm looking at that road still. And where's my house? There it is. Okay. I want to make an aerial image, and I want to capture kind of part of this road so I can line it up. And I might end up making a couple, but start with that. So just go ahead and make a screen grab. And I'll just call this. Okay. So over here in our Rhino, we're going to bring our aerial image in. Be mindful not to drop. So I can just drag this image in. Be mindful not to drop it on the surface, because then it'll be applied as a texture to that surface. So just go ahead and drop it somewhere in where there's no objects, and then use the option picture. Now I can kind of scale it somewhat. Okay, so I'm still wireframe, and I'm going to try and kind of line this up, and I'm using the command scale. And at some point, you'll be able to pick up kind of on the geometry of that road. Obviously not perfect, but oops. You can get kind of close enough. There we go. Okay. And so now I have kind of the location of the house relative to the road. The other thing I could do if I wanted to, could zoom more in on the house and take another screen grab just to get a kind of higher resolution image of that. I'll drag that guy in. Try and line it up as best I can. Okay, that's pretty good. And by the way, you can lock objects to make them always appear behind. Okay, so there we have it. That's how to kind of figure out where the house should be within this large topo area. So, I mean, you can keep the whole topo if you want. Some people have mentioned that it's pretty heavy. Obviously, there's a ton of kind of points in this surface, which is why it'll tend to run slow, especially when you try and trim it. So what I would do is I would just make a rectangle that's pretty large, but doesn't have to be huge. Go like this big for right now. You could probably even go smaller, to be honest. I would also be careful because when you trim this guy, I think because of how large it is, you won't be able to get that information back. So you could make a copy. Obviously, you still have access to this file, so you can just go ahead and bring it in again if you wanted to, but I'm just going to trim it. Again, again, that might take a couple seconds. There we go. Okay, and then I can bring in my house. And what I want to do, I'm actually just going to unlock this and put it on a separate layer. Okay, there's the house, and in my other model, which already has that. Just copy this guy to clipboard and bring it over. It should already be more or less scaled the right dimensions, and I don't really want to mess with that. Okay. And bring it up. Oh, where am I? Go that far. I'll bring it up to where it kind of sits in the topography nicely. Again, we talked about this, but when we're moving around in 3D and we find that our orbit makes us lose track of where we are, quick shortcut is to use the command zoom and the option selected. That'll make whatever we have selected the center of our orbit. Make it a little easier to navigate. So there we go. We pull it up. I need to go up a little bit more. Put it kind of sits in the site where we want it. And so you will find that this surface might not be the most perfect. So what we're also going to do is we're going to make another cutout where we can kind of adjust. I'm going to draw a second rectangle, something like that. I want it to be big enough that it will still kind of meet with the surface at the edges. So any adjustments I make in the center won't affect the edges. So I'll be in top view. I'm going to have that surface selected and type in split, and then select that rectangle. Okay. So there we go. And now we can kind of, so yeah, one thing I wanted to point out, obviously, when we turn the points on for the surface, if we wanted to edit it, because it's a trimmed surface, it still has all the points, full surface. So I'm going to turn that off. So if I wanted to make a new surface that didn't have all those points, I'm going to do that right now with this procedure. I'm going to make a bounding box around my surface. I'm just going to isolate so that it's easier to see what I'm doing. I'll select that surface that I just made. I'm going to use the command contour, and using my box, so it's asking me for a base point. I'll use the lowest point, one of the corners at the lowest point. If you're not familiar with bounding box, it makes a box kind of at the extents of an object in each dimension, X, Y, Z. So we'll use the bottom point and then draw up along one edge, and the contours will come out horizontal, right, particular to that direction. It'll ask for a distance. I'm going to use a pretty small distance. I'm going to start with 0.5 of a foot. Press enter, and then I have to wait a couple seconds. Start drawing them. There we go. So this is the same procedure we use to extract topography lines from this model. So we'll wait a second here. Okay, so there's our lines. And I'm going to hide this box for a second. I'm going to delete my surface. Don't need it anymore. And so this is actually how you make topography from contour lines if you have them. Position them, three-dimensionally, and then you can use the command patch. And patch will kind of like interpolate a surface through a set of contour lines. We can mess with the number of spans to control the resolution. For the most part, you want to keep these at what their default is. I think this might be 0.5 by default, but I have my 0.1. And then if I click preview, we can kind of get a sense of how closely it'll match. I'll click OK. And as we orbit around, we can see not a lot of, for the most part, our curves are not kind of clipping through our surface. That's a sign that our surface matches our lines pretty accurately. So that surface is kind of really well interpolated through those set of curves. I'll show you what I mean by a bad version of that. If I turn this way down, the resolution of my span's way down. And now you can see I have big areas that are kind of not really on the curves. We want to kind of get slightly better resolution than that. So I think 40 by 40 was pretty good. Let's try like 30 maybe. Our file running a little smoother. Fine. Okay, and then I'll bring back my box, show selected. Just unhide my box. And then I'm going to just stretch this guy in the z-axis. Using my gumball, you can also do that with scale 1D. Scale it along the edge from the midpoint. Then I'm using the trim command, and I'm going to trim away the excess and delete the box. And I could even delete these contour lines. I can always get them back from the surface. So now I'm going to type in show to bring everything back. But now you can see we're still pretty close to the edges. We have a little bit of gap, but that's really not a problem. We can fix that. We need to in like a site section or something in a drawing. I'll select the surface. I'll go points on. And we have more than enough points here. I'm going to select individual points and kind of move them around. Begin to manipulate the topography to kind of meet with the building the way it should. Should just take a few little adjustments to make that happen. Necessarily that steep. I'm just toggling from wireframe to shaded. I think it's actually higher on this side too. So okay, there we go. So the only other thing that I would do at this point is, if we go into our house, we can see that there's go inside our house here. You see the topo is like coming through the rooms. So we also want to trim away topography where it intersects the kind of interior of our house. And I'll just make a rectangle. I'll go 3-point and trace the perimeter of the house. I'll go into top view, select the surface and type in split. Use the curve to split it. And then delete the inside. There we have it. So now we kind of have it might be a little high on that side. I will say, for the most part, even though it's trimmed, so we move the points around now. As long as we only move them in the z-axis, it should do a pretty good job of keeping our trim outline where it needs to be. But we can also untrim. Use a command called untrim. Again, that information is all still there, and then we can just retrim it. We ended up messing it up or something like that. Retrim that outline. Okay, And the last thing I wanted to show is obviously our house is rotated now because that's how the house is situated on the site. If you wanted to continue to model this way, what I would recommend doing is make yourself what's called a CPlane or a construction plane. Use that option 3-point. And I'm going to orient a plane to, like, the slab, basically the ground level of my house. That's going to be the easiest. So a C-plane will, if I go into wireframe, you can see it. So it's made the coordinate system now be like oriented to our house. The other thing I'm going to do before I start working again is I'll save it. I'm going to go to named C-planes, save as, call it whatever you want to call it, because every time you reset your viewport, or yeah, like anytime you reset your viewport, I'm going to reset that. So now my C-plane is back to world XYZ. And so in my named C-planes panel, which you can get to just by typing in named C-plane, I can just double click on that one I just saved, and we're back there. And so every time I draw something, it's going to be on the kind of floor level, and it's going to be oriented to the kind of orientation of the house. And so that'll enable me to keep working even though I have kind of this weird rotation to my house. Okay, so that'll be the end of this tutorial. I'm going to do another one covering some of the other details, interior details of the house. All right.